The sun had not yet risen when Ethan Summers awoke that September morning. At 32, an adventure guide in the Everglades, he followed a routine he loved, preparing for another day of expedition, sharing the wonders of that natural sanctuary with tourists. What he didn't know was that it would be the last day of his old life. "Good morning, boss. Small group today, huh?" Jack, his work partner for 5 years, was already organizing the life jackets for the 6 tourists who would arrive in a few hours. "Yeah, Jack, it'll be easy." Ethan adjusted the ropes in his backpack with the experience of someone who knew every knot, every movement necessary to ensure everyone's safety. The group arrived punctually at 8 a.m., 2 couples from New York and a mother with her teenage daughter from Los Angeles. Ethan greeted them with his characteristic welcoming smile, starting the safety briefing he had done hundreds of times. The morning went by normally. The tourists marveled at the exuberance of the Everglades, and Ethan shared his vast knowledge about the local fauna and flora. It was after lunch during a stop for bird watching that everything changed. Lily, the 15-year-old teenager, discreetly moved away from the group to photograph a blue heron. Without realizing it, she approached an unstable embankment. Ethan noticed the movement from the corner of his eye. "Lily, don't move!" he shouted, running in her direction. The following seconds seemed like an eternity. The ground gave way under the girl's feet, and in a quick motion, Ethan managed to push her to a safe area. However, the momentum took him straight to the cliff. The fall of almost 60 feet was followed by a violent impact against the rocks in the riverbed. The physical world darkened, but for Ethan, a new reality opened up. While his body lay motionless in the shallow waters, his consciousness expanded in a way he had never experienced before. Suddenly, there was no more pain, fear, or worry. An intense and welcoming light enveloped him, and he found himself before presences that radiated an indescribable peace. "It's not your time yet, Ethan," a soft and melodious voice echoed in his mind. "Your journey is just beginning." The luminous presences surrounded him, transmitting messages that seemed engraved directly on his soul. They weren't words in the conventional sense, but deep understandings about life, time, and purpose. One of them stood out. "Every moment is a point in the great tapestry of existence. You will learn to weave your story in a new way." Meanwhile, in the physical plane, Jack and the tourists were desperately organizing the rescue. Ethan's body was removed from the water, and first aid was provided right there before the helicopter arrived. For 3 minutes and 42 seconds, his heart had stopped. At the hospital in Miami, the diagnosis was devastating. Spinal fracture, multiple fractures in legs and arms, traumatic brain injury. "Mr. Summers, you were very lucky to survive, but recovery will be long and difficult. We can't guarantee that you'll walk normally again." Olivia, his older sister, arrived from New York the next day. Seeing him surrounded by machines and immobilized, she couldn't hold back her tears. "Everything will be okay, little brother," she whispered, holding his hand. "You've always been the strongest of us." In moments of lucidity, memories of the experience with the beings of light mingled with the painful reality of the present. In his dreams, he saw intricate patterns of lines and colors that seemed to tell a story he didn't yet understand. It was during a particularly difficult night, when pain kept him awake, that Ethan had an inexplicable impulse. He asked the on-duty nurse for something that surprised everyone: needle and thread. "I need to create something," he said, unable to explain why. With trembling hands and limited movements, he made his first stitches on a piece of fabric. Each movement was painful, but something inside him knew this was the way. The first stitch was crooked, the second too, but by the third a familiar sensation invaded him, the same peace he had felt during his near-death experience. The nurses watched, intrigued, as this strong and active man was now completely absorbed in something so delicate and meticulous. What they couldn't see was that with each stitch, Ethan was weaving not just an embroidery, but a new way of existing. The first rays of sun were entering through the window of room 304 when Olivia found her brother completely absorbed in his work with needle and thread. The small piece of fabric he had started the night before already showed a circular pattern that, although simple, had something hypnotic about it. "Since when do you embroider, Ethan?" asked Olivia, genuinely surprised. "Since last night," he replied without taking his eyes off his work. "It's strange, Olivia. It's as if my hands knew exactly what to do, even though I've never done this before." Olivia observed her brother with a mixture of concern and fascination. The Ethan she knew was a man of action, always on the move, guiding groups through the Everglades, climbing, swimming. Seeing him, there focused on something so delicate and meticulous, was disconcerting. "Do you remember anything about the accident?" she asked hesitantly, sitting on the edge of the bed. Ethan paused his embroidery, and for the first time since he had begun, looked directly at his sister. "I remember everything, Olivia. Not just the accident, but what happened after." His voice trembled slightly. "I saw something that changed everything." In the minutes that followed, Ethan shared with his sister his experience with the beings of light. He spoke about the inexplicable peace, the messages he received, and how somehow that embroidery was connected to it all. "They showed me that every moment of our lives is like a point in a great tapestry," he explained, running his fingers over the stitches he had made. "Every choice, every experience, everything connects to form a larger pattern." The following weeks brought a different routine to room 304. Between physiotherapy sessions and medical visits, Ethan dedicated every free moment to embroidery. His hands, once accustomed to ropes and climbing equipment, now danced with needle and thread, creating increasingly complex patterns. Dr. Richard, his physiotherapist, noticed a significant improvement in fine motor coordination. "It's impressive," he commented during a session. "The embroidery is working as a form of therapy that we couldn't have planned better." One morning during breakfast, Ethan received an unexpected visit. Lily, the teenager he had saved in the Everglades, had discovered his whereabouts through Jack and came with her mother to thank him personally. "I never had the chance to thank you properly," said Lily, her voice choked with emotion. "You saved my life." Ethan smiled, showing the work he was focused on. "See this pattern here?" He pointed to a sequence of stitches that formed a spiral. "It represents that moment. It wasn't a sacrifice, Lily. It was a privilege." The young girl approached, fascinated by the embroidery. "How did you learn to do this?" "It's a long story," Ethan replied, selecting a new thread of purple color. "It started during my recovery, but actually, I think it started long before, in that moment between life and death." The nurses began to notice something peculiar. Patients who entered room 304 seemed to leave different, calmer, more hopeful. Some swore that Ethan's embroideries emitted a special energy, a vibration they couldn't explain but could feel. Mrs. Thompson, an elderly lady hospitalized in the next room who suffered from chronic pain, began to visit Ethan regularly. "When I'm here watching you embroider, the pain diminishes," she confided. "It's as if each of your stitches carried away a bit of my suffering." Olivia, with her background in biology and her skeptical nature, tried to find rational explanations for the phenomena she witnessed. But there was something in her brother's work that defied conventional logic. One night, while embroidering under the soft light of the bedside lamp, Ethan had another mystical experience. The colors in his hands seemed to come to life, and he found himself once again enveloped by that familiar light he had known during his near-death experience. "You're just beginning to understand," the melodious voice echoed in his mind. "Every stitch you make is a prayer, a healing, a transformation." When he came to, he realized he had created a pattern he had never seen before, a complex mandala that seemed to pulse with its own life. Olivia, who was in the room at that moment, swore she saw a golden light emanating from the embroidery. "What's happening to you, Ethan?" she asked, both amazed and frightened. "I'm transforming, Olivia," he replied, with a serenity that didn't match his physical condition. "And this is just the beginning." After 3 months of hospitalization, the doctors finally agreed to Ethan's discharge. His physical recovery, although still incomplete, had exceeded all expectations. What no health professional could explain, however, was the influence his embroideries seemed to have on people. Olivia had prepared her apartment in New York to receive him. The old office was transformed into a space dedicated to his new craft, with a table specially adapted to his physical limitations, adequate lighting, and all the materials necessary for his embroideries. "Welcome to your new studio," said Olivia, pushing his wheelchair into the room. Natural light entered generously through the large window, illuminating the organized shelves with threads of all imaginable colors. Ethan felt his eyes fill with tears. They weren't tears of sadness or self-pity, like those he had shed so many times in the hospital, but of gratitude and recognition. "It's perfect, Olivia. Thank you." The news about the adventure guide who had become a mystical embroiderer began to spread, first through the hospital staff, then through the social networks of patients who had experienced his gift. Soon people began to seek him out, looking not just for his embroideries but for the peace that emanated from them. Lily, who had become a constant presence in his life, began to help him with organizing visits. "It's amazing how everyone who comes here leaves different," she observed one afternoon while organizing the schedules. "It's as if your embroidery spoke directly to each person's soul." One day, he received a visit from Ryan, a 45-year-old executive who had recently lost his wife to cancer. The man arrived skeptical, brought by a friend who had insisted that Ethan's embroideries could help him with his grief. "I don't really know why I came," admitted Ryan, sitting uncomfortably in front of Ethan. "I don't believe much in these things." Ethan smiled, continuing his embroidery. "You don't need to believe in anything, just observe." As he worked on a new pattern, using shades of blue that blended smoothly with golden threads, Ethan began to feel something familiar, that luminous presence that visited him in special moments. Without interrupting his work, he allowed the energy to flow through his hands. Ryan, who watched in silence, felt a sudden change in the environment. The air seemed to become lighter, and a sensation of warmth enveloped his chest. Suddenly, he had the distinct impression that his wife was there by his side. "Sarah?" he whispered, tears flowing freely down his face. Ethan continued embroidering, but his voice sounded different when he spoke. "She's here. She says love never dies. It just transforms, like the stitches in this embroidery." The experience with Ryan marked a turning point in Ethan's work. He understood that his gift went beyond creating beautiful patterns. It was a bridge between dimensions, a form of communication that transcended physical barriers. Olivia, who had witnessed everything, could no longer deny the extraordinary nature of what was happening. "How do you do this, Ethan?" "It's not me who does it," he replied, contemplating the newly finished embroidery. "It's as if the threads and needles were just instruments for something greater to manifest. Each stitch is a connection to something that has always existed, but that only now I can perceive." As his fame spread, Ethan began to receive invitations to share his story at events and television programs. He refused most, feeling that his work needed to remain intimate, personal. However, he agreed to give an interview to a magazine specializing in integrative medicine. "What happened to you is scientifically inexplicable," commented the reporter during the interview. "How do you see the relationship between your gift and traditional medicine?" "I don't see a separation," Ethan replied, his hands moving gently over a new work. "Medicine takes care of the body, but there are other dimensions of being that need attention. Embroidery for me has become a way to access these dimensions, to weave connections between the visible and the invisible." One afternoon, while working on a particularly challenging project, Ethan had another powerful vision. He saw himself surrounded again by the beings of light he had encountered during his near-death experience. This time, however, they showed him something different, a great cosmic tapestry, where each human being was a point, each story a thread, each experience a color. "Your mission is just beginning," said the luminous presences. "What you have learned needs to be shared. Each person carries within themselves the potential to weave their own healing." When he came to, Ethan had a new clarity about his purpose. It wasn't enough to create healing embroideries. He needed to teach others to find their own connection to the sacred through the art of embroidery. "Olivia," he called his sister, who was reading a book near the window. I think it's time we expand this, to transform this space into something bigger. What do you have in mind? A center for teaching and healing. A place where people can learn not just to embroider, but to reconnect with their essence through stitches and colors. Olivia observed her brother with admiration. The restless man who lived in search of physical adventures had transformed into a spiritual master who found the extraordinary in the seemingly ordinary, and now a new phase was about to begin. The transformation of Ethan's apartment into a center for healing and teaching happened naturally, as if each element found its place on its own. What was once his private studio became a welcoming space where small groups gathered to learn not just embroidery techniques, but a new way of understanding life. Lily, now 16, became his first official student. The traumatic experience they had shared in the Everglades had created a special bond between them, and the young girl demonstrated a natural sensitivity for energetic work with threads. "When you embroider, it's as if you could see beyond the fabric," she commented one afternoon, watching Ethan work on a new project. "As if each stitch opened a window to another world." "That's exactly it," he replied, selecting a golden silk thread. "The embroidery is just the visible part of the work. The true miracle happens in the invisible." Ethan's classes were different from anything his students had ever experienced. Before starting any project, he guided them in a meditation where colors, shapes, and patterns revealed themselves naturally. "The design already exists," he explained. "Our task is just to make it visible through the stitches." Olivia, who initially planned to just help with organizing the space, began to notice changes in herself. Her scientific view of the world, although still present, expanded to accommodate the extraordinary experiences she witnessed daily. "It's as if I'm learning a new way of seeing," she confided to Ethan. "The colors seem more alive, the patterns more meaningful. Even the dreams have changed." One morning, while preparing the material for another class, Ethan had an experience that would change the course of his work again. As he touched a ball of purple wool, he was invaded by a series of visions. He saw people in different parts of the world, all connected by invisible threads of light, weaving a great cosmic tapestry. "It's time," the familiar voice of the beings of light echoed in his mind. "The knowledge needs to expand. Each person who learns to weave with consciousness strengthens the web of life." That same day, Ryan, who continued to frequent the space regularly, brought an unexpected proposal. As an executive of a large technology company, he had developed a platform that would allow Ethan to share his teachings online. "Imagine how many people you could reach," he argued. "Your gift doesn't need to be limited to New York." Ethan was silent for a moment, his hands moving automatically over the embroidery in his lap. The pattern that emerged spontaneously looked like a network of connections, similar to the one he had seen in his vision. "It's no coincidence that you bring this idea today," he finally said. "But we need to do this the right way. It's not just about teaching embroidery techniques. It's about awakening something that already exists within each person." With the help of Ryan and Olivia, Ethan began to develop a unique program that combined in-person classes with online meetings. The course, which he called Weaving the Invisible, attracted people from different parts of the United States and the world. During one of the first online classes, something extraordinary happened. While Ethan was demonstrating a special technique of meditative embroidery, several participants simultaneously reported the same experience, a golden light that seemed to emanate from their screens, filling their spaces with a palpable energy of peace and connection. "How is this possible?" asked Olivia, who was monitoring the comments. "They're in different countries, different time zones." "Physical distance is an illusion," Ethan replied serenely. "In the fabric of existence, we're all connected. Embroidery just helps us perceive this." Emma, who was now assisting with the classes, began to develop her own gifts. During a session with a student who was struggling with deep depression, her hands were guided to create a specific pattern that, inexplicably, brought immediate relief to the woman's suffering. "It's as if the threads know exactly what each person needs," she explained to Ethan afterward, "as if each color, each stitch, carries a specific frequency of healing. Ethan's work began to attract the attention of researchers interested in understanding the therapeutic effects of meditative embroidery. A team of neuroscientists proposed a study to map the brainwaves of people while they embroidered under his guidance. "The results are fascinating," reported the lead researcher. During the sessions, participants enter a state of brain coherence, similar to that observed in meditation, masters with decades of practice. But for Ethan, the true validation of his work came from the small daily miracles he witnessed. People reconnecting with their essence, finding purpose in the midst of pain, discovering that they could be authors of their own healing story. 1. Night while finishing a particularly significant embroidery, Ethan received another vision. This time he clearly saw the next step in his mission. He needed to train teachers, people who could not only apply the techniques, but truly understand and transmit the sacred essence of this work. The announcement of the first teacher training class for the Weaving the Invisible method attracted hundreds of applicants. Ethan, however, knew he needed to be selective. He wasn't just looking for people skilled with needle and thread, but souls ready to understand and transmit the sacred dimension of this work. "How are we going to choose?" asked Olivia, looking at the pile of applications on her desk. "We won't be the ones choosing," Ethan replied, picking up a skein of golden thread. "The work itself will show us who is ready." He then developed a unique selection process. He sent each candidate a small kit containing a piece of white fabric and 3 colors of thread. The instruction was simple: embroider what your soul wants to say. The works that returned revealed much more than technical skill. Some embroideries seemed to pulse with life, emanating an energy that Ethan could feel even through the photographs sent. Others, although technically perfect, lacked that essential connection with the invisible. After 3 weeks of careful analysis, 12 people were selected to form the first class of Weavers of Light, as Ethan called them. Among them was Emma, who had become not just his assistant, but a true partner in developing the work. In the months that followed, the group began to disperse, each following the call to establish new centers in different locations. Ryan took the work to Los Angeles, Emma to New Orleans, others headed to different states and even other countries. Ethan remained in New York, now focused on a new aspect of his mission, training people to recognize and activate their own gifts of healing and transformation. The tapestry is a catalyst, he explained to new students, but the true power of transformation is within each one. We are all threads in the great fabric of existence, each with our unique color, our specific frequency. The stories of transformation multiplied. A woman suffering from a terminal illness completely regained her health after spending 3 days embroidering near the tapestry. A man who had lost the ability to dream due to trauma not only recovered his dreams, but began to have prophetic visions. Olivia, who had begun this journey as a convinced skeptic, now dedicated herself to creating a methodology that would allow her to document and understand the phenomena she witnessed daily. "It's no longer a question of believing or not," she said. "It's a matter of expanding our understanding of what is possible." One night, while the center was quiet, Ethan had one last significant vision. The beings of light showed him the future. He saw a network of sacred tapestries covering the planet, each functioning as an anchor point for higher frequencies of consciousness. He saw people from all cultures rediscovering the sacred art of embroidery as a form of meditation and healing. "What began with your accident in the Adirondacks," said the luminous presences, "was part of a larger plan of planetary awakening. Each stitch made with consciousness is a seed of light planted in the field of reality." Ethan shared the vision with Olivia the next morning. "Do you understand now why everything happened that way? Why I needed to go through that near-death experience?" Olivia hugged her brother, tears of understanding in her eyes. "So that you could die to your old life and be reborn as a weaver of realities." 5 years passed since the activation of the first sacred tapestry. What began in a small center in New York had expanded into a global network of weavers of light, with more than 50 centers spread across different continents. Each location had its own portal tapestry, each unique in its pattern, but all connected in an invisible web of planetary transformation. Ethan, now able to walk without assistance, although still with some limitation, had become an almost mythical figure in the spiritual world. However, he maintained the same humility and simplicity that had characterized him since the beginning of his journey. On a special spring morning, the Tapestry of Life Center in New York was particularly busy. It was the day of the celebration of the 5 years since the activation of the first tapestry, and weavers from all over the world had gathered for a unique event. "It's amazing to see how everything has expanded," Olivia commented to her brother, observing the diversity of people that filled the space. "I remember the day you asked for needle and thread in the hospital. Who could have imagined?" Ethan smiled, his eyes shining with that familiar light that had never left him. Actually, the beings of light knew. This whole movement was part of something much bigger than we could understand at the beginning. Emma, who had returned from New Orleans especially for the celebration, approached with extraordinary news. The center she had established in Louisiana had developed a unique form of work, combining sacred embroidery with local rhythms and traditions. "It's as if each place finds its own way of manifesting the energy," she explained. "In New Orleans, people embroider to the sound of jazz, and the patterns that emerge have the strength of the city's spirit." Ryan, who now coordinated the largest center in Los Angeles, shared similar experiences. Each tapestry has its own personality, reflecting the energy of the place and the people who created it. But they're all connected to the same source. During the celebration, something extraordinary began to happen. The 50 portal tapestries spread around the world began to pulse simultaneously with a more intense light than normal. At the New York Center, the original tapestry, the first of all, began to emit a soft sound, a vibration that seemed more like a celestial chant. Ethan, feeling the familiar presence of the beings of light stronger than ever, understood what was happening. "It's the final synchronization," he announced. "The tapestries are aligning in a unique frequency." The people present began to feel the effects immediately. It was as if each tapestry in the world was simultaneously transmitting and receiving energy, creating a unified field of elevated consciousness. Olivia, who over the years had developed an extraordinary sensitivity to energetic phenomena, perceived something even deeper. "Ethan, look, the tapestry, it's transforming." Indeed, the pattern of the original tapestry seemed to be changing subtly, as if it were alive and breathing. New designs emerged spontaneously, creating a constantly evolving mandala. "It's the next phase," Ethan explained, his voice blending with other voices, as if the beings of light were speaking through him. "The tapestries are no longer just portals. They're becoming conscious beings, guardians of a new frequency of existence on Earth." At that moment, all those present were taken by a shared vision. They saw the network of tapestries as a web of living light enveloping the planet, each point pulsing in sync with the heartbeat of the Earth. They understood that the work they had done was part of a much larger process of conscious evolution. "Each stitch we made," Ethan continued, "each color we chose, each intention we manifested through embroidery, all of this was preparation for this moment, the moment when humanity begins to awaken to its true nature as weavers of reality." Emma, tears of understanding in her eyes, completed, "It's not just about embroidering fabrics, it's about learning to weave light, to weave love, to weave consciousness." The sound emanating from the tapestry increased gently, filling the environment, with a harmony impossible to describe with earthly words. Each person present felt deeply connected not only to each other, but to all life, the entire cosmos. Olivia, observing her brother, saw that he now radiated that familiar light permanently. It was no longer something that came and went. He had become the very light he once encountered between life and death. "What happens now?" she asked, although in her heart she already knew the answer. "Now," Ethan replied with a serene smile, "we continue weaving." Each person who learns to embroider with consciousness adds their own thread to the infinite tapestry of existence. Each stitch made with love strengthens the field of light we are creating. Looking at the hundreds of people gathered, each carrying within themselves the potential to be a weaver of light, Ethan felt a deep gratitude for his entire journey, for the accident that almost took his life, for the experience with the beings of light, for every challenge and every discovery. In the end, he concluded, I understood that we are not just the weavers or the tapestry, we are the very fabric of the universe, constantly creating and recreating ourselves through the infinite power of love. And so, what began with a simple request for needle and thread in a hospital room transformed into a planetary movement of awakening consciousness, reminding everyone that each life is a precious thread in the great tapestry of existence, and that each moment is an opportunity to weave more light into the world.